Now we're going to measure on the bark side of the cane. So I might as well at this point mark my wire points. Mark my third wire and my first wire. But the reason we're here is to actually mark the collar points. That's critical. And I just make a little mark, and I'll come back and do it straight across shortly. Then I flip it end for end, and I do my second wire mark. I'm not telling you the measurements because you should do your own measurements. And 10, 20, 30. Well, there you go. My collar's at 30. And then I put it on the freehand easel. And this easel is great because it's long enough that you can hold it securely and put it in any position that you want. I actually need to move the light a bit. And then I take a straight edge knife. A retired Landwell is great for this. And I find my 30mm collar mark, and I just saw lightly straight across. I'm really trying to go only the depth of the bark. That's not very even. Let's try another one. Okay, I'll be more careful this time. This one, get lined up. Let me just do a little rocking motion to establish the straight line and then do it. Oops. Again, I just rock the easel back and forth, and then, yeah, that's a better line. Can you see it? If I focus this thing, you can see it. These IPVOs are really very good. Taking me a bit of time to get used to it. Yeah, that's the collar mark. Doesn't go very deep. Great. And let's see if it's still in focus. I'm going to move that. Now I start close to the back and take a very, very shallow cut. Just carefully go up to the, or even just before the mark, and bend the strip up. But just go cautiously, and you'll stop right at the cut mark. Overlapping, don't dig too deep. Again, as always, it's much better to have a sharp knife. And if it sticks a bit, don't worry, that'll all get dealt with shortly. Switch it end for end, same thing. So at this point, some people do this before they put the cane on their expensive profiling machines. I used to do it just to save the blade a bit. So this might be a step that you're already familiar with. Then I go back, can you see it? I go back to the middle, and oops, that was a bit deep. If you go too deep, just stop and retake it. Try to keep the strokes fairly even so that I don't have to do any corrections right off the bat. And this is the stage that's much easier if the cane has been soaked overnight. As I mentioned in the first video, I prefer to work on almost dry cane. But this one I soaked longer just to demonstrate how responsive the wood is. So that's pretty smooth if you're careful. If it were rougher, I would then take my my reed file, which is hiding over here. An actual reed file, and smooth it out. But I don't need to at this stage. Good. So I've sharpened my knife, and I start by taking strokes at the back. The angle should be as close to vertical as possible. If the knife chatters, which this did a little bit on my first stroke, wasn't concentrating, you can hear it, that can sort of interrupt its ability to cut cleanly or scrape cleanly, so I stop and fix that if it gets bad. It's not really that bad yet. And for end, do about the same. And you're allowed to use dial indicators or micrometers, whatever you want. I don't. I just measure my initial gouge thickness, and then I take it from there. So I am scraping from the back to the front, overlapping strokes. It helps if you keep it smooth, then you don't have any big corrections to make. And I'm just going to take my nail file, take out any little bumps. And this is actually why I prefer to work on as dry, one of the reasons why I work on as dry a piece of cane as possible, because it's much easier to file. And I don't think you can see that. Don't fall over you. Can you see that? It's out of focus. Overexposed. Let's try underexposing it. Maybe that'll help. So I always am looking at the cane from the side. Let's see if it's in focus down there. Looking at the taper. So there won't be much taper yet. A little bit. So even from the beginning, this side is much thicker than that side. It sometimes doesn't hurt to check your gouge before you start, if it's a little bit uneven. But from the beginning, I'm always aware of the tapers. It's going to taper from the middle to the sides, from the back to the front. From the middle to the sides is gradual, but very visible. And likewise, the back to front taper is also very visible. That's actually what you see when you are looking at the cane from the side. And now I'm starting to put more of the front taper in. And again, in the beginning, you can mark the center point, and you can draw your tip there if you want. I don't, because it gets the cane all dirty, but I certainly did in the beginning. Again, I'm now working on the back to front tip taper. It's all very thick still. And when you get used to this and you're working on your own and you're not doing as I'm doing right now, which is describing what I'm doing, this part goes very, very quickly. You hold the blade, or you hold the knife right on the blade, definitely not on the handle. You can hold it on the handle later on, but it doesn't give the solid contact and control that you need for these planing gestures. Now I'm shaping the tip. I don't, in this process, I don't, certainly not in the rough profiling stage, I don't look at the cane through a light. But if I had one, I would show you. So looking at the sides, overlapping the strokes, blending. You can stop at any point and blend things in with your file. I prefer to get to the finishing stage before which is soon. And again, you can run your fingers along here and feel how the profile is developing. At this stage, there's a slight taper from the back to the front, and then a fairly steep taper here. Looking good. It's all very thick, so I'm just going to go back and take it from the back to the front. You can develop your own sequence of steps, always keeping in mind the profile that you want to achieve. I mean, even if you're not profiling your own reeds, you're using profiled cane, and you can take that cane and examine it, feel the profile. So to just remind you, this is the rough profile stage, which means that I will be going fairly far, but far enough so that I'm satisfied there's enough cane off, and then I proceed to the finishing stage. There's a lot of wood at the back here. And I'll do a bit more in the middle, sides. And what I'm doing here is using my thumb and my whatever available finger, but it's my middle finger, just flexing the tip to see if we're getting close, and we're starting to inch towards a usable tip. Definitely don't want it to be extremely thick when I fold it over. So when I've gone far enough with the rough profile, I set the cane aside and let it dry. And obviously, the longer the cane has been soaking, the longer it has to dry. And that is so that I can really finish the surface in the next stage, which will be the finished profile. So, yeah, that's starting to be flexible. I check the sides. It's quite thick. I might do a bit more there. This is better. So I'm just going to take these slightly thick sides down a bit more, because I want it to be generally balanced between the two sides, but also the four quadrants. And it looks like, I suspect maybe the gouge was a bit thick on one side. Hang on, mixed up. I think I'll stop. So it's rough profiled. It's literally somewhat rough, and I have more work to do, but I want to start filing, and I don't like filing when it's this wet. So I'm going to let it dry for a bit. The way I let them dry is I put the cane on one of the freehand easels. It's just an easel actually, but it's essential to have these big ones for freehand. And I take some dry cotton string and just lightly wrap. Oops. Lightly wrap it on so that it doesn't pull away from its proper radius. There we go. Okay, that's it for now.